After someone rejects you, there's a natural assumption in their mind that they hold the power, that they've called the final shot. They think they've made the decision, and now the game is over. But what they don't realize is that rejection doesn't end the story. It just turns the page. And what's written next depends on how you respond. You see, most people believe that the person who walks away has the upper hand. They think silence from the rejected party is submission or defeat. But here's the truth that often gets overlooked. Your silence after his rejection doesn't just change the dynamic, it reverses it. Because while he was prepared for tears, for pleading, for questions like a why, or a can we talk about this, what he wasn't prepared for was nothing. No message, no reaction, no attempt to make sense of what happened. Just your graceful disappearance from his emotional radar. And in that silence, something uncomfortable begins to brew, uncertainty. He starts to wonder, did I misjudge her? Was she more secure than I thought? And wait, did she care less than I assumed she did? Because here's the thing, when someone expects you to crumble and you don't, it disrupts their entire emotional script. He rejected you with the confidence that you'd still be there in some form. And when you're not, the dynamic flips. Suddenly, he's the one wondering. He's the one thinking more than he planned to. And why? Because your silence removed his access, not just to your words, but to the role he played in your life. You didn't cling, you didn't chase, you didn't collapse. You just exited, not with bitterness, with elegance. That's what truly unnerves someone who's rejected you, not the angry text, not the guilt trips, but the calm withdrawal of energy, the kind that says, I'm not going to try and prove my worth to you. I'm already sure of it. And now he's left not with the satisfaction of having control, but with the sting of absence. And it's a very specific kind of pain, not from losing you, but from realizing he no longer has access to your affection, your softness, or the attention he might have taken for granted. That's why your silence is so powerful, because instead of grasping for dignity, you kept it. Instead of asking for closure, you became it. Instead of begging for validation, you showed you didn't need it. You didn't retaliate. You didn't explain. You simply let the silence speak. And it said everything he never expected to hear. And now he's the one wondering what he lost. Men, just like anyone, are wired to feel the weight of absence more deeply than the noise of presence. This is especially true in romantic dynamics, where so much of the emotional currency is exchanged through subtle, often invisible gestures. The consistent good morning texts are small affirmations, the attention you gave without ever asking for anything in return. All of that builds a rhythm. It becomes a baseline that they get used to. And once it's gone, the silence isn't just quiet, it's deafening. This is where your power lies. After rejection, most people make the mistake of staying emotionally available, liking posts, sending just checking in text, or leaving a door open through casual communication. They think that staying in his orbit might eventually remind him of what he walked away from them. But in truth, people don't notice what's always there. They notice what disappears. When you remove yourself fully, quietly, and without a dramatic exit, you interrupt his emotional rhythm. Suddenly, the attention he didn't even realize he relied on is gone. The energy you brought into his life no longer fills his inbox, his feed, or his ego. And because it was so consistent, he's not used to living without it. That's when the realization hits, not all at once, but in quiet moments when he finds himself wondering, why haven't I heard from her? You don't need to say anything. In fact, it's more powerful when you don't. Because silence doesn't ask a question, it creates one. It triggers curiosity in a way that words simply can't. Men are problem solvers by nature. They want to understand how things work, what changed, why someone pulled back. So when you go silent after being rejected, he isn't just registering that you're gone, he's trying to figure out why. And that's where your value begins to compound in his mind. Your absence forces him to examine the emotional impact you had, often for the first time. While you were present, he may have overlooked your presence, but now that it's missing, he has nothing to distract him from that emotional vacuum. He starts replaying conversations, wondering if he misread your strength or misunderstood your worth. And the longer you remain silent, the louder those questions become in his head. This is not about playing games. It's about understanding human behavior. Emotional impact is not created through force. It's created through space. When someone has been accustomed to your emotional availability, The sudden shift into silence creates contrast, and contrast is what wakes people up. So when you stop showing up where you used to, when your energy is no longer something he can casually lean on, it's not that you've vanished. It's that he's finally noticing you because he's feeling what life is like without your emotional presence. And that, more than anything you could ever say, becomes the thing he can't ignore. When you go silent after being rejected, something incredibly subtle but deeply powerful happens. You become a mirror. And here's what I mean by that. While you were present in his life, emotionally available, communicating, trying, offering your affection, you were essentially absorbing a lot of the emotional weight in the dynamic. You were providing the warmth, the reassurance, the emotional labor. You were showing up in ways he probably didn't even fully recognize, let alone appreciate. But the moment you remove yourself from the equation, no drama, no angry messages, just distance, he's left with nothing to distract him from himself. That emotional mirror you've now created doesn't show him you anymore. It reflects him, his decisions, his words, his actions, his emotional limitations. And if there's anything people are rarely prepared to confront, it's an undistorted image of themselves. Your silence holds up a mirror that forces him to sit with the reality of what he chose. Maybe he thought you'd wait around. Maybe he assumed you'd chase clarity. But when you don't, when you simply allow space to exist, it reveals a deeper truth. But he's now alone with the emotional consequences of his own decision. This mirror effect is what creates discomfort, not because you've done anything wrong, but because people often run from accountability. When you were there, he could avoid self-reflection. He could rationalize the situation by projecting onto you, telling himself you were too emotional, too available, too much. But when you vanish, that narrative starts to crumble because there's nothing left to blame. No interaction to manage, no behavior to respond to, just silence. Just silence. And that silence forces him to look inward. He might not admit it. He might not reach out. But that internal tension will be there, growing quietly. Because now he's left with his own echo, bouncing off the walls of a space that used to be filled with your presence. And more importantly, he starts to realize he no longer has access to your softness, your energy that once made him feel seen, admired, or emotionally validated. This is how emotional clarity works. Sometimes people don't see who you are when you're right in front of them. At the moment you remove the reflection, when the mirror no longer shows them a loving, supportive image, they're left to see themselves in a way that's often uncomfortable. And that discomfort is a gift, not a punishment. Because it means you've stepped out of a dynamic that was never meant to drain you. And in doing so, you've given him the one thing that could actually shift something inside him. Not your words, not your presence, but your absence. A mirror he never asked for, but now can't unsee. There's something people often underestimate in the aftermath of rejection. The emotional validation they provided. When someone walks away from a relationship or a connection, they usually believe they're just saying no to the person. But what they don't realize is that they're also saying no to all the emotional safety and validation that came with that person's presence. And the absence of that is what hits the hardest once the silence settles in. You see, when you were showing up in his life, you weren't just physically present. You were emotionally available. You gave him kindness, attention, understanding, softness, the kind of emotional comfort that doesn't come around every day. You responded to his texts thoughtfully, remembered the little details he told you, cheered him on, supported his insecurities even when he didn't express them directly. That emotional presence creates something incredibly soothing, something grounding. It becomes part of a person's internal stability, even if they never openly acknowledge it. But when he rejected you, he probably thought he was simply opting out of a romantic future. He thought he was making a clean break without recognizing the deeper cost. He didn't just reject a relationship. He rejected the space you held for him, the warmth you gave without asking for anything back, the way you consistently made him feel significant without making it about ego or games. And now, in your silence, he's realizing what he lost. Not just you, but the feeling of being emotionally validated by someone who genuinely cared. That loss is more painful than most people expect, because emotional validation isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet. It's felt in the background. It's felt in the background. And when it's gone, the contrast is sharp. Suddenly, there's no one checking in on how his day went. No one lighting up when his name appears on their screen. No one anchoring him emotionally. This is where the regret often begins to creep in, not because he suddenly wants a committed relationship, but because he now senses the emotional void that used to be filled by you. And that void can't be quickly replaced. Why? Because validation like yours isn't transactional. It wasn't a performance, it was real. And real is rare. That's why your silence has so much impact. It's not about withholding, it's about no longer offering emotional energy to someone who didn't value it while they had it. It's about self-protection. NBD. And as much as it may hurt in the short term to be rejected, the long-term effect of your quiet departure is profound. It makes him feel the full weight of what he took for granted. So no, he may not miss you because you were always there. He misses how you made him feel. And when that feeling disappears, especially after he walked away from it, it doesn't just sting, it lingers, because deep down we all crave emotional safety. And once you've felt it, its absence can be devastating. Closure is something we're all taught to seek after a relationship ends or someone rejects us. We're told it's the healthy thing to do, to talk things through, ask the hard questions, to hear some kind of final explanation that helps us move on. But what no one tells you is this: closure is a luxury, not a right. It's not guaranteed, and often it's not even honest when it is given. Because the truth is, people rarely have the self-awareness or emotional courage to give you the kind of closure that truly satisfies. And chasing it only keeps you tethered to someone who's already made their decision. Your silence after rejection is not a passive-aggressive act. It's not a game. It's a boundary. It says, I don't need you to explain why I wasn't enough for you, because I know that I am. That's the shift that changes everything. When you stop seeking closure from the person who rejected you, you reclaim the power they assumed they had over your sense of worth. You stop handing them the pen to write the final chapter of your story. The idea that someone owes you closure implies that they are the one who gets to define your narrative. But when you go silent, when you walk away without a dramatic conversation or a need for final words, you're making a bold statement. I don't need you to help me understand my value. I'll write my own ending. That's emotional maturity. That's self-respect. And here's the paradox most people never expect. When you don't chase closure, the person who rejected you often ends up needing it more than you do, because they expected something. They expected questions, hurt, confrontation, something that made them feel like they still held emotional relevance in your life. When none of that comes, they're left with their own unanswered questions. Why didn't she fight for this? Did she not care as much as I thought? Was I wrong about her? Wrong about her? Your silence creates a sense of unfinished business for them, not for you. But that's not your responsibility to resolve. Closure is something you create within yourself. It's in how you interpret the rejection, how you choose to grow from it, and how you decide to move forward with grace and dignity. You don't need another conversation to understand that someone who truly values you wouldn't have let you go in the first place. So when you choose silence, you're not closing the door out of spite. You're closing it to protect your peace. You're saying, I may not have gotten the apology, the reason, or the clarity I thought I needed. But I've got enough self-worth to walk away without it. And that is more powerful than any explanation could ever be. There's an important difference between emotional availability and emotional overextension. Being emotionally open, vulnerable, and expressive is a beautiful thing. It's a sign of confidence and maturity. But where many people go wrong, especially in romantic situations, is mistaking availability for submission. They believe that if they just give more, prove more, or show more affection, the other person will finally see their value. But in reality, constantly showing up for someone who isn't reciprocating doesn't make you more lovable. It just makes you emotionally exposed without protection. June, wanting someone, even deeply, doesn't justify chasing them after they've already shown you they're not ready or willing to meet you where you are. Emotional availability is a strength only when it's paired with discernment. You can be open, but not desperate. You can care, but still choose not to offer that care to someone who's clearly not choosing you. That's where restraint becomes self-respect. When someone rejects you, whether directly or through their actions, they are communicating that they are not ready or willing to receive what you have to give. And continuing to pursue them after that point doesn't make you more loyal or committed. It actually starts to erode your self-worth. because the more you pour into someone who's already walked away, the more you end up abandoning yourself in the process. This is where silence becomes your emotional boundary. It's not you pretending not to care. It's you prioritizing yourself. Restraint isn't about playing games or making them miss you. It's about having the strength to say, I know what I bring to the table, and I'm not going to keep offering it to someone who's not hungry. That boundary not only protects your peace, it also elevates your value. Because people take note when someone doesn't fall apart at their feet after being rejected. They notice when you don't fight for someone who isn't fighting for you. It disrupts their expectation. And while you don't do it for their reaction, it often ends up leaving a deeper impression than any emotional plea could. Being available means your heart is open. But being wise means you protect it. Not everyone deserves access to your vulnerability, especially those who have shown they're not capable of honoring it. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is take a step back, not out of fear, not out of manipulation, but out of deep love for yourself. So yes, want deeply, feel deeply, but love yourself deeply enough to walk away when you're not being loved in return. Emotional availability is your power. Emotional restraint is your protection. And the person who learns how to master both doesn't just survive rejection, they rise from it. When someone rejects you, it's easy to believe that they're not thinking about you at all afterward, that you've disappeared from their mind as quickly as they've disappeared from your life. But that's rarely the case. In fact, when you go silent after rejection, you often stay on their mind more than if you had tried to convince them to come back. Why? Because human beings are naturally drawn to mystery, to things left unsaid, and to the weight of unresolved emotion. And your silence creates exactly that. Become the what if in his mind, the unanswered question, the chapter that didn't end with a full stop, but rather with a blank page. And there's something about that kind of emotional space that keeps someone circling back in their thoughts, even if they never reach out. You didn't chase, ace. You didn't try to rewrite the ending. You simply walked away with dignity. And that kind of exit lingers. Your silence isn't just an absence. It's a presence he feels in the form of uncertainty. He starts to wonder what you're thinking. He replays conversations, looking for clues. He wonders whether you've moved on, if you ever truly cared, or if maybe, just maybe, you were stronger than he gave you credit for. All of this runs through his mind because you gave him nothing to hold on to. No emotional closure, no dramatic ending, no last plea for love. Just silence. And that silence echoes far louder than any words you could have spoken. When people know exactly how you feel, they get closure. They get certainty. Even if your words are emotional or passionate, they allow someone to neatly place you in a box. She still wants me. But when you say nothing, you remove your presence entirely. You deny them that sense of closure. And in its place, you plant a seed of doubt. A doubt that keeps growing every time they find themselves wondering about you. This isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding emotional psychology. People often miss what they can no longer access, and your silence, your withdrawal creates that inaccessibility. You're not trying to make him think about you, but paradoxically, that's exactly what ends up happening, because people are drawn to the unresolved near. Few things are more haunting than someone who left quietly, powerfully, without trying to prove their worth. Over time, your silence becomes a story in his mind. He fills in the blanks with curiosity, regret, maybe even longing. He imagines different scenarios. Did you meet someone else? Did you stop caring? Are you happier without him? And because he never got to witness your breakdown or desperation, he starts to realize something he didn't see before. Maybe you were the one who got away. And that thought, that's what keeps you in his mind long after the rejection. Because silence, when paired with self-respect, becomes unforgettable. Sometimes the most powerful emotional response isn't a reaction, it's evolution. When someone rejects you and you respond not with desperation or pleading, but with silence and growth, you do something truly rare. You turn pain into progress. You show without a single word that your life doesn't stop because they chose to walk away. And in doing so, you shift the emotional dynamic completely. Most people expect to be missed in a very specific way. They expect you to fall apart, to pause your life, to linger in the space they left behind. They expect the void they created to consume you. But when you respond by rising, by getting stronger, more focused, more grounded, They don't just see you differently. They feel the difference. They feel the difference. And often they feel the regret. Your silence isn't empty. It's filled with forward motion. It's in the way you take care of yourself more. The way you channel your energy into new goals, into your work, your health, your friendships. It's the glow that begins to return to your face, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because you're healing for you. For you, that kind of transformation is magnetic. It's the kind of thing someone can feel even from a distance, through the pictures you post, the peace in your tone when they randomly hear your name, or the way you no longer orbit their world like you used to. And this is where something fascinating happens. The person who once rejected you begins to feel a shift in the emotional power dynamic. Where they once felt in control, certain of your place in their life, they now feel uncertainty. They see a version of you they never fully appreciated. And now they're on the outside looking in, not because you're trying to punish them, but because your silence gave you the space to evolve without their influence. This is why silence is more than a boundary. It's a catalyst. It gives you the emotional distance to reconnect with your own value, your own path. And as you grow, you naturally outgrow the person who couldn't recognize your worth when they had access to it. That growth is not just healing. It's your quiet comeback. And that comeback, it's unforgettable. It's unforgettable. Not because it's flashy or vengeful, but because it radiates peace, strength, and authenticity. You're not the same person who got rejected. You're better, not in a spiteful way, but in a way that says, I learned, I grew, and I'm thriving. That energy is what people remember. That's what makes them look back with a quiet ache, realizing they let go of someone who didn't just survive the loss, but transformed because of it. There's a misconception that silence means weakness, like you've given up, like you're shrinking away from conflict or unable to express how you feel. But in reality, silence is often the loudest decision you can make. Especially after rejection, silence becomes your most honest form of self-expression. It says, I've said all I needed to say. I've shown all I needed to show. And now I'm done giving energy to someone who chose not to value it. When you choose not to explain yourself after someone pushes you away, you're breaking the cycle of emotional overcompensation. You're no longer seeking to be understood by someone who has already made it clear they aren't trying to understand you. That takes real strength. Because the impulse to explain, to justify, to prove your love, your loyalty, your worth, it's powerful, but acting on it usually does more harm than good. It gives the other person continued emotional power over you. And more importantly, it tells you that your clarity must come from someone else's validation. But when you stay silent, you affirm something deeper, that you trust yourself. You don't need them to see your side to know that your intentions were pure. You don't need them to acknowledge your effort to know that it was real. And you don't need a response to know that your silence is not emptiness. It's a boundary, a signal of emotional closure on your terms. What makes this silence so powerful is that it's not rooted in manipulation or pride. It's rooted in clarity. You understand that any attempt to re-engage would only reopen wounds, revive confusion, and delay your healing. So instead, you choose peace, you choose stillness. And in that stillness, you're not just walking away, you're evolving. This decision confuses the person who rejected you. They may have expected tears, drama, or at least a conversation seeking answers. But when none of that comes, they're left to fill in the blanks. And the longer the silence lasts, the more they begin to question their own actions. Not because you demanded they rethink things, but because you left enough space for them to feel the weight of their own decisions. Silence is not passive. It's intentional. It's saying, I don't need to fight to be seen. I don't need to plead to be chosen. And I will not lower my self-worth to remain in proximity to someone who couldn't see it when it was offered freely. In the end, silence speaks volumes not because it hides your truth, but because it protects it. It holds space for your dignity. It honors your growth. And it creates an emotional boundary so strong that no rejection can dismantle it. That's not weakness. That's quiet, unwavering power. When you choose silence after rejection, you're doing more than protecting your peace. You're opening the door to your own emotional healing and growth. Healing isn't something that happens overnight, nor is it a linear process. It's a journey that requires patience, self-compassion, and sometimes the courage to step back from a story that no longer serves you. Silence creates the space needed for this internal work to begin and unfold. Often, people feel pressured to rush into closure or quick fixes, whether it's seeking explanations, trying to rekindle the relationship, or distracting themselves with constant activity. But without silence, the noise of unanswered questions, unresolved feelings, and lingering doubts keeps you trapped in a cycle of emotional turmoil. Silence, in contrast, offers a pause. It's the calm after the storm where you can start to breathe, reflect, and truly reconnect with yourself. In this quiet, you begin to peel back the layers of what the rejection really means, not as a judgment on your worth, but as a reflection of the other person's readiness, capacity, or compatibility with you. You start to see that a no is not a reflection of your value, but rather an invitation to redirect your energy towards someone who will meet you fully. This shift in perspective is essential for healing because it moves you from self-blame into self-awareness. Silence also allows you to process your emotions without external pressure. You can feel sadness, disappointment, or even anger without needing to explain or justify those feelings. That emotional honesty is a cornerstone of healing. When you give yourself permission to experience the pain quietly and fully, you build resilience. You prove to yourself that you can withstand hardship without losing your sense of self. Moreover, silence creates space for growth. It's in these quiet moments that you start to rediscover who you are outside of the relationship, what your true needs and desires are, and what boundaries you want to set moving forward. You learn to cultivate self-love and self-respect, not from someone else's approval, but from within. This internal foundation becomes your emotional anchor, making you stronger and more whole. And as you heal, you also send a powerful message to yourself and to others that your worth is not negotiable. That rejection, while painful, is not a verdict, but a redirection. You're not defined by someone else's choice to walk away. Instead, you're defined by how you rise after the fall. Ultimately, silence after rejection is not a void, it's fertile ground. It's where healing takes root and where new possibilities begin to grow. It's the space where you reclaim your power, rewrite your narrative, and prepare yourself for the love and respect you truly deserve. And that journey of healing is not just the end of one story, it's the courageous beginning of the next chapter in your life. Here's a powerful conclusion that ties together all the ideas from your speech in the style of Matthew Hussey: clear, compassionate, and empowering. The silence you choose after rejection isn't emptiness, it's a powerful statement. It's a reflection of your worth, your boundaries, and your refusal to settle for less than you deserve. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, and simply step away, you give both yourself and him the space to truly see what was lost and what you are always worth. Your silence holds up a mirror, reveals emotional truths, protects your peace, and creates room for your growth. It's not a weakness, but a quiet strength that speaks louder than words ever could. By embracing this silence, you reclaim your power, honor your healing, and open the door to a future where you're loved fully and authentically. Remember, rejection is never the end of your story. It's an invitation to rise, to evolve, and to show up as the strongest, most radiant version of yourself. So hold your silence with pride, because in that space, you're not just surviving, you're thriving, you're thriving. And that is the most beautiful comeback of all.